So today we're diving into a document that makes a truly wild claim. What if you could predict the markets? Not with economics, but with the actual laws of physics. It's a concept called structural intelligence, and it promises to completely redefine how wealth is made. Let's dig in and see what this is all about.
Right out of the gate, the document throws this question at us. Think about that. A company the size of Chevron growing 100 times over in just 10 years? That sounds, well, kind of crazy, right? But according to this source, the answer isn't just possible, it's predictable if you have a completely new system. It's a bold hook, and it's definitely designed to make you question what you think is possible in our economy.
So how do they justify needing such a radical new system? Well, it starts by claiming that the whole system we're using right now, it's broken. It argues that our conventional financial models aren't just a little outdated, they're actually collapsing. So let's see what kind of proof they're offering up for this supposed crisis.
All right, first up, they point to this snapshot from early 2026. And look, these aren't just any investors. The source is claiming that these are some of the biggest, most respected portfolios in a major economy, and they're seeing their wealth get cut in half. The point they're trying to make is pretty stark. If the experts are this vulnerable, then the old playbook just isn't working anymore.
And they're saying this isn't just a one-off thing. On one side, you've got a venture from a super trusted brand, the Tata Group, down big, and on the other, a whole country, Saudi Arabia, a place we think of as having endless cash, is apparently tightening the purse. So the message here is that this is a systemic problem, one that's hitting both the best companies and the biggest global economies.
Okay, so after painting this gloomy picture of a crisis, the document completely switches gears to build up its own credibility. It basically says, hey, don't just take our word that things are broken, look at how often we've been right when everyone else was wrong. So let's take a look at what they claim they've gotten right in the past. Okay, so the first big example they give is something they call the Great Silver Heist. The claim is that way back in May 2022, their system saw this massive under-the-radar drain on the world's silver. And get this, they're saying everyone else missed it. We're talking central bankers, the IMF, all the big players who are supposed to be watching this stuff. And here's what they say happened next. A massive 246% growth in silver's price, just blowing gold's performance out of the water in that same time frame. And the key takeaway they want you to have is that this wasn't some lucky guess. It was the direct result of their predictive system at work.
All right, next up, they point to India's defense sector. The argument is that their system flagged these companies as major strategic players long before the rest of the market caught on, and they point to these huge numbers. We're talking nearly 900% growth for companies like HAL and BEL as proof. And for the grand finale of their track record, they talk about what they call the blue economy, under this headline, The Greenland Prophecy. Here they're showing just astronomical growth in naval and energy stocks, like Mazagon Dock, with a nearly 2,200% jump. Whoa! So the story they're weaving is that their system saw this fundamental shift to naval power and energy independence, while everyone else was looking in the wrong direction.
Okay, so they've set the stage, right? There's a crisis, and they claim they have the secret sauce. But what is this system really? Well, this next part promises to pull back the curtain on what they call the physics of profit.
So here it is, the core idea. Structural intelligence supposedly uses the fundamental laws of the universe, things like gravity and quantum mechanics, to predict financial markets. The argument is that all our current models are flawed because they're based on squishy, unpredictable human behavior. This system claims to replace all that with the cold, hard, predictable laws of physics itself.
So this diagram here is supposed to show us how it all fits together. It claims structural intelligence is where three very different fields meet. First, you've got quantum mechanics. Think of that as the engine for calculating probabilities in really complex systems. Then there's general relativity. They're using that to model market trends, kind of like planets orbiting the sun. And finally, you have blockchain, which gives you a super secure, unchangeable record. The big idea is to mash all three of these together to create a totally new kind of financial engine.
And what do you get when you mix all that together? The promise is a self-optimizing ecosystem. The goal is to take human error, human emotion completely out of the equation, which they claim will unlock entire trillion-dollar markets that we can't even see right now. That's a seriously ambitious vision.
So then they break this engine down into 5 revolutionary patents. Now this is a whole lot of jargon, so let's try to break it down. They claim to use geodesic AI to see market patterns using nature's geometry, quantum security for unhackable protection, gravitational models like planets in orbit to keep a portfolio balanced, vibrational analysis like checking for stress on a spaceship to predict market crashes, and finally, rocket execution, which uses rocket science to make huge trades without rocking the boat. It's basically applying these really complex physics concepts, almost like metaphors, to the world of finance.
And that brings us to the grand finale, the most dramatic part of this whole document. It lays out a prophecy for the next decade, a time they're calling the profit window. And they claim this window is going to define who gets wealthy for generations and who gets left behind.
Yeah, this quote right here says it all. The document is arguing that we're leaving behind the slow, steady, predictable growth we're all used to, and we're about to enter a new era of explosive, infinite expansion. But they're very clear. This party is only for the people who get on board with their new system.
Okay, so this chart is the heart of their whole prophecy. They call it the cosmic factor, and it lays out a really stark choice. Two completely different futures. The yellow line shooting upwards is the infinite expansion path for people who adopt this new way of thinking, and the red line plummeting down, that's what they call the inevitable decline for everyone else.
So let's walk through this timeline, step by step. It says right now we're in the gap, where all the old models are breaking down. Then 2026 is the pivot. That's the make or break moment. And after that, the decade from 2026 to 2036, that's the infinite expansion, where they predict a 10 times explosion in wealth for anyone on the right path.
So at the end of the day, where does that leave us? We've got a vision that's built on some pretty complex physics, some very bold claims about past predictions, and one heck of a dramatic prophecy for the next 10 years. Is this a blueprint for a totally new financial reality, or is it just an incredibly elaborate piece of science fiction? Either way, by putting us at this crossroads between total collapse and explosive growth, it forces you to ask a really compelling question. What if they're right?